Joining us to discuss this further is Daniel Turner, founder and executive director of Power the Future. Daniel, so good to have you join us. So I want to ask you, ship monitoring data shows that the only oil getting out of Venezuela in the recent days is going to the U.S. So can you tell us what the situation was with Venezuelan oil prior to Maduro's capture?
Well, Chevron had exemptions for quite some time to continue to operate when the Hugo Chavez regime and the Maduro regime kicked most of the refiners out of Venezuela. Chevron continued to operate, and American law allowed them to continue to do that. So there's really no change in that. I think the biggest change the export to other countries, whereas the president has put an embargo on oil leaving the country. And that's bad news if you are communist China. You got to get your oil from somewhere. They've lost their clients from Iran. They've lost their clients now from Venezuela. So there's a big squeeze play happening, and oil is the leverage that the president is using.
So you're saying it's bad news for China. Can you go into detail as to what exactly are the impacts?
Yeah, well, China doesn't have a domestic supply of oil. It imports almost all of it, and that's one of their biggest vulnerabilities. When you look at the size of the Chinese Navy, when you look at the size of the Chinese manufacturing sector, it can't survive without oil. Oil makes the world go round, and so China's biggest vulnerability has been their lack of domestic oil. They've been getting it from a couple of places: Russia, obviously, Iran, and Venezuela, and those markets are now drying up for China. So there's a power play here happening where the president is using oil as a weapon to weaken communist China, who is our number one geopolitical threat and adversary. And so I think it's a really strategic move on President Trump's part. He hasn't had to mention China by name, and yet China seems to be the biggest loser in a lot of his geopolitical actions.
Okay, so what is the main use for oil for China? Is it towards its economy or something else?
Absolutely, its economy, all its entire manufacturing sector. Manufacturing can't really operate without oil. Yes, it runs a lot of electricity, but you can't build a lot of electricity plants without oil. Look at the size of Chinese infrastructure projects. All that machinery runs on diesel. So China, on the one hand, they can talk they're going green and their green initiatives, but all of that is manufactured from petrochemicals, and that all comes from oil. So oil is really the foundation for all manufacturing, for all industry. And if you are China and your supply is drying up, or maybe not drying up, but your imports are being held, you have to be very, very nervous. This is not sustainable for the Chinese economy, and I think that's the point. I don't think we want China's economy sustained. I think we want it to collapse, and that will be better for world peace. So there's a lot of strategery, as W. Bush would say. There's a lot of strategery happening, and oil is the secret weapon President Trump is using to dominate world politics and world peace.
Okay, to use that word, strategery, can we talk a little bit more about that? Why is President Trump deciding to take control of Venezuelan oil to try to rebuild it? Is it a key part of this operation? Can you just go a bit deeper into this?
I think it's definitely part of it. Even outside of oil, Maduro should have been held accountable for the weapons he's launched on American soil. If nothing else, the import of tens of thousands of his criminals into American sovereign territory. Joe Biden let them in, so that's another conversation for another time. But we have Venezuelan gangs operating in America because Maduro sent them here, and they've raped and murdered and pillaged and created chaos. That alone is reason for this aggression against Venezuela. Outside of that, it's hegemony on the Western Hemisphere, which America has always maintained under the Monroe Doctrine is the American hemisphere. So it's putting China on notice. China has a lot of operations in South America. And if China is weakened in South America, that's good for America and that's good for the world. And it's the same play that the president has done with oil sanctions in Russia, oil sanctions in Iran. Unfortunately, a lot of bad actors have oil. And if those bad actors can't produce it and bring it to market, they get weak. And when they're weak, they're not dangerous. So the president is using oil as this number one weapon. We're producing more than ever before, and our enemies are producing less. And if you are a pro America, America first patriot like I am, that is a very good thing for world peace.
Okay, what do you see happening in the short term with oil exports in Venezuela, let's say months from now?
Yeah. Well, I think the remarkable thing is that in the short term, there's been no impact really on prices. Well, crude has gone up internationally a little bit, negligible. I think $1 a barrel. But rewind 10, 15 years, when an action like this would have happened, we would have seen a $10, $15 spike in oil prices. That's how volatile this industry was. And yet, because of American energy dominance right now and the amount of manufacturing and production we have domestically, oil markets absorbed it. Oil markets look at what's happening in Venezuela. They look at the millions of barrels that are being blockaded, and the world markets are not affected by it. That's absolutely remarkable. So in the short term, Venezuela and its government is more likely to deal with the president and with America's interests in securing peace in South America than if oil had spiked and they were still exporting their number one product.
Okay, Daniel, just finally, I was talking about this topic with a guest yesterday. I was saying that Forbes made a really good point that the total value of Venezuelan oil reserves combined equals the Magnificent Seven. That's like Amazon, Tesla, Nvidia combined,
Yeah.
right? So, I just want to ask you a similar question I asked the guest yesterday. What is the potential here if the US is able to unlock this economic force?
There's great potential, but there's also has to be a lot of realism, right? People keep throwing around this number that Venezuela has 310 billion barrels of oil, and they do. But those barrels of oil are not coming to the surface anytime soon. It takes about 5 or 6 years after you start drilling to actually bring oil to market. Venezuela is producing, I think, around 1 million, maybe even less barrels a day. That's how dilapidated their infrastructure is. So yes, there is great potential, but I think optimistically, if after 2 or 3 years Venezuela is producing 1 million or 2 million barrels a day, that would be good news for the Venezuelan people. There's a lot of potential here, but we have to be realistic. This is going to take years, if not decades, to actually bring to fruition.
Right, that's what the guest yesterday said as well. It's going to take some time before this whole thing, is completed to the U.S.'s desires. But anyways, Daniel, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.